Welcome to Cheater Fallout. Let us get started with today's story. My ex-wife's new husband humiliated me at a gala. He called me a failure right before I fired him and his entire C-suite team. They had no idea I owned the place. The scotch in my hand was an 18-year-old single malt, smooth and expensive. But it couldn't cut through the sudden sharp rage I felt when I heard that laugh. The annual Global Logistics Charity Gala was supposed to be a quiet night for me, a silent investor enjoying the anonymity. That was before Julian Vance, my ex-wife Sarah's new puffed-up trophy, spotted me. He was sitting at a massive VIP table surrounded by his own corporate court, 3 other suits from Global Connect Logistics, GCL, the massive logistics company where he was the executive vice president of strategy. Julian stood up, a massive, obnoxious smile plastered across his face, and loudly clinked his champagne glass. The whole section of the ballroom went quiet. "Well, look who decided to grace us with his presence," Julian boomed, pointing a finger directly at me. He was loud enough to stop 3 waitstaff in their tracks. The great Daniel Hayes didn't realize they were letting the unaffiliated in tonight. "Good to see you, buddy. Tell me, how's that early retirement treating you? Still figuring out the complex nuances of us daytime television." I was 42 years old. I had sold my first logistics tech company, ShiftStream, for $150 million cash 2 years ago. I was, by any measure, retired. But to Julian, a man whose entire identity was stapled to his corporate badge, not having a job meant not having a soul. I stayed calm. I was wearing a custom-tailored suit that cost more than his monthly car payment, and I took a slow sip of the scotch. "Julian, Sarah, nice to see you both. Everything's going great. Thanks. Busy with investments." Sarah, my ex-wife, was sitting beside him. She looked beautiful but strained, her eyes darting between me and Julian's increasingly aggressive expression. She didn't look like she wanted to be part of this spectacle. "Investments?" Julian scoffed, taking a dramatic, performative sip of his champagne. "That's what you call it when you don't have the guts to build something new, right, fellas?" He turned to his colleagues, who chuckled on cue. I recognized them from the internal files. Marcus Thorne, the vice president of operations, and Chloe Lynn, the chief financial officer. The 3 most toxic players at GCL, Julian's personal cheerleading squad. Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking the bait. "It's tough when you peak too early, Julian. Dan here built a decent little system back in the day. Sure, but we're talking next-level scale now, the big leagues. It requires consistent effort, not just one lucky hit and then ghosting." Julian waved them over to my smaller table, a public execution. "Come on, guys, let's go say hello to the past." They marched over, surrounding me. 6 people watching the show. This was the exact public humiliation Julian had planned. He put a condescending hand on my shoulder. "Seriously, Daniel, we're working 80 hours a week over at GCL, fixing problems, making real money. Meanwhile, you're what? Picking out artisanal coffee beans? You lost your edge, man." Sarah needed someone with ambition that wasn't just a nostalgic memory. That was the line. That was the trigger that went from professional snobbery to brutal personal attack. I could feel the blood heat in my neck. Julian was trying to take credit for Sarah, for my failure, and for his own supposed genius. All in one small package. He didn't know that my investments had become an acquisition. He didn't know that the company he claimed to be fixing, Global Connect Logistics, was hemorrhaging cash and struggling because of his latest disastrous system integration. And he certainly didn't know that 3 weeks ago, through a complex holding structure, I had purchased GCL, the parent company, for a cool $2.1 billion. I looked Julian dead in the eye, my voice dropping to a low, cold register that somehow cut through the noise better than his bluster. "Actually, Julian, I was at this event to meet with the board of a new project, something that is currently facing a catastrophic infrastructure failure because a certain executive vice president of strategy approved a week-long replacement schedule for a core routing system that should have taken 24 hours. The board is looking for new leadership to clean up that mess." Julian froze, the hand on my shoulder retracting instantly. His face went white under his tan. The GCL 3000 routing system being down for the entire week was GCL's dirty little secret, a crisis only the C-suite knew about, and which Julian was frantically trying to spin as an opportunity for process optimization. Chloe Lynn, the chief financial officer, stepped forward, her professional mask slipping into confusion. How do you know about the GCL 3000 downtime? That information is strictly internal. Julian recovered quickly, a desperate laugh bubbling up. Oh, please. Don't listen to the old guard. He probably read it in a trade blog, trying to sound important, Daniel. It's sad. You're retired. You're obsolete. Go home. He turned to the onlookers, gesturing dramatically. Guys, focus on the future. We have a massive board meeting at 8 a.m. tomorrow to finalize the strategy for overcoming this minor setback. Let's get back to celebrating real success. I smiled, a genuine cold smile that didn't reach my eyes. Julian, I strongly suggest you get a good night's sleep. You'll need it. I'll be seeing you at 8 a.m. I turned, leaving them stunned, and walked out into the cool night air. The humiliation fueled me. Julian's mockery was the final proof that this wasn't just about business. It was about protecting hundreds of decent employees from toxic, incompetent leadership. The C-suite meeting tomorrow morning was no longer just a formality. It was going to be a reckoning. That night, sleep was impossible. I was on the phone with my legal team and the GCL corporate secretary. We finalized the documentation. I didn't want to wait 3 days for the scheduled corporate review. Julian had demanded a reality check, and I was going to deliver it at the earliest possible moment. The system Julian ordered to replace the GCL 3000 was dangerously flawed. A decision made on the golf course, not in the data center. The week-long outage was already costing GCL $5 million a day. A fact Chloe Lynn, his chief financial officer accomplice, had been expertly hiding in the financials. At 7:45 a.m. the next morning, I walked into the GCL headquarters, a place I had never stepped foot in before. My only company was Maria Santos, GCL's corporate secretary and my secret ally, and 2 security personnel I'd hired discreetly the day before. Julian, Marcus, and Chloe were already in the third-floor boardroom, along with 2 other senior vice presidents, huddled around a massive table littered with papers and anxiety. I walked in without knocking. The room was tense. Julian looked rougher than last night, his expensive tie slightly crooked. He looked up, his face a mask of annoyance when he saw me. "What the hell is this?" "Security!" Julian shouted, slamming a fist on the table. "Who let this lunatic in here?" "I told you yesterday, Daniel. This is a C-suite meeting. This isn't a place for idle retirees." Marcus and Chloe backed him up immediately. "Get out, Daniel. This is confidential," Marcus sneered. I didn't react. I walked to the head of the table, stood behind the chief executive officer's empty chair. The former chief executive officer was already gone, having sold his shares to my holding company, and placed my laptop on the polished oak. I looked at Julian. "Relax, Julian. No need to call security. They're here for me, not for you. Yet." I motioned to the 2 guards standing by the door. "I'm here because you are. You were right about one thing last night. GCL has a catastrophic infrastructure failure that a new leader needs to clean up. I know about the week-long system outage, Julian. I know about the $5 million per day bleed. And I know about the financials that Chloe conveniently restructured to hide the impending disaster." Julian started to stand, fury and confusion warring on his face. "You're delusional. Get out of my office." I cut him off, raising my voice just enough to command the room. "This isn't your office, Julian. It hasn't been for 3 weeks. My name is Daniel Hayes. As of 3 weeks ago, through Pacific Crest Holdings, I acquired 100% of Global Connect Logistics. I am the new sole owner and chief executive officer." The silence that followed was absolute. Chloe's jaw literally dropped, revealing a gasp. Marcus Thorne looked like he'd been hit by a truck. Julian, however, just stared, a look of pure, utter disbelief. "That's impossible." Julian finally managed to sputter. "I know. I'm the executive vice president of strategy. This is a multi-billion-dollar company. It was a $2.1 billion acquisition, Julian." I corrected, pulling up a document on the screen. It was the internal memo confirming the change of ownership, signed and dated. And no, you wouldn't know. I kept my involvement strictly confidential, precisely because I needed to observe the management structure without pretense. And last night, you provided all the confirmation I needed. I didn't stop to let the shock subside. I leaned across the table, maintaining eye contact with the man who mocked me in front of my peers. "Julian, last night you called me obsolete. You called me a failure. You ridiculed my life choices. This morning, I'm returning the favor, effective immediately. You are terminated without cause due to demonstrated incompetence, gross negligence regarding the GCL 3000 replacement, and the cultivation of a hostile work environment documented in the Human Resources files. Your access is revoked. Your contract is being reviewed by legal, but you are not to return to the premises. I didn't even look at the two others, Marcus Thorne, Vice President of Operations, and Chloe Lynn, Chief Financial Officer. Your complicity in covering up the true costs of this ongoing system failure is noted. You are also terminated effective now. Your offices have been secured. Security will escort you. The room erupted. Marcus started yelling about his lawyer. Chloe started crying and frantically grabbed her laptop. Julian was still speechless, his face a sickening mix of rage and terror. He tried one last time. You're doing this because of Sarah. This is personal revenge. I met his accusation with a hard stare. Last night was personal, Julian. This morning is professional. You lost this company $35 million in the last week because you treat critical infrastructure like a side project and your employees like dirt. You are a terrible leader. My decision would have been the same even if I'd never met Sarah. But thank you for the extra motivation at the gala. It definitely sped up the timeline. The security team moved in quickly, escorting Julian, Marcus, and Chloe out of the boardroom. The two remaining vice presidents, visibly terrified, stammered their loyalty. I let them sit. Gentlemen, I said, looking at the suddenly silent room, the past is over. We have a crisis. I want a complete, honest briefing on the GCL 3000 failure in 10 minutes. No spin, no lies, just the data. I'll be leading the fix personally, and if anyone thinks they can run their department with Julian's kind of arrogance, I suggest you grab your personal effects now. The next few weeks were a blur. I took over the Chief Executive Officer role, diving deep into the tech. My original company, ShiftStream, had specialized in exactly the kind of architecture GCL needed. I flew in my old engineering team, and within 72 hours, we had a temporary system in place, stopping the financial bleeding. The total downtime was reduced from a devastating week to a manageable 3 days. The cultural change was even faster. Once the toxic top layer was removed, the talent buried underneath was phenomenal. I promoted 2 vice presidents who had been constantly suppressed by Julian and Marcus. Employee morale shot through the roof. I hadn't heard from Sarah directly, but I saw her outside the office complex a month later. She looked tired and defeated. Julian, as I heard, was struggling to find work. His reputation as a political schemer who crashed a multi-billion-dollar company had followed him. Sarah approached me at a coffee stand nearby. Daniel, I heard what you did. What you really did. I bought the company and fired the incompetents, I replied simply. He was abusive after the firing. He blamed me, blamed you. He was a fraud. Daniel, he lied about his success. She paused, looking down. I made a terrible mistake leaving you. You were the real thing. Sarah, I said, my voice quiet but final. I built a multi-million-dollar company while you were with me. When things got hard, you left. You wanted the reward without the work. You chose the appearance of success over the reality. Now that you see the price of the appearance, you want the reality back. But that reality, our reality, is gone. I'm moving forward. I finished my coffee, gave her a polite nod, and walked back towards the GCL entrance. Not as the obsolete retiree, but as the man who just saved hundreds of jobs and a multi-billion-dollar company from the hands of the man who mocked him. The sweet taste of justice was less about Julian's downfall and more about the power of competence finally triumphing over corrosive ego. It was the most satisfying day of my entire career. If the story of humiliation and ultimate corporate victory resonated with you, hit the like button and subscribe. Have you ever seen an arrogant boss get a public comeuppance? Share your story in the comments below. Thank you for watching until the very end. Wishing you happiness, peace, and a wonderful day ahead.